I don't know how many of you knew this or not, but I don't have much hair. And I get sunburned just thinking about being outside in the sun. So I always try to wear a wide-brimmed hat anytime I'm outside. Between my daughter and I, we've got quite a little collection of hats going on, from felt cowboy hats, straw cowboy hats, other wide-brimmed straw hats. A lot of these you can't just take off and throw down in a heap like maybe you might do with a baseball cap, because they have to be stored properly, otherwise you risk the chance of them being deformed, losing their shape. We definitely don't want that to happen. So today, I want to build a hat rack that's wall mounted. That way you can take the hat off, place it on the rack, it's up out of the way, because now I don't have any great spot to store these. So this is going to store the hats properly, and also it's going to free up a lot of space, making things more organized and easy to get to. I've got an idea in my head of what I want this thing to be, so it's time to make that idea a reality. I'm Jeff, you're watching Home Built Workshop. Let's build this hat rack. To start out our hat rack build, I did a little searching around the shop and I found this piece of elm. This is some stuff that I milled up with my Alaskan chainsaw mill. I think it's going to work awesome. Elm has become probably one of my favorite woods. It just has a cool color, has a really neat grain. I really enjoy working with it. It's got a little bit of a weird smell, but after a while you kind of get used to it. This piece has a little bit of a crack down the middle right here, but I think if we're careful with laying this out, we can get a nice long board out of this section right here. At least that's the plan. I'm going to use a long straight edge to mark out a nice straight line along one side of the board. This gives me a good straight reference edge to start laying out the rest of my cuts. Now I want to measure off of that straight line and just kind of see how wide of a board we can get before we get into this little bit of a crack. Most of the crack is down here and I'm not too worried about, but some of it's right here I want to try to avoid. Looks like we could go with about a 7-inch board. I think 7 inches is going to put it right into that crack, but it gives us a little bit of material that we can trim away if we need to. I think that's about the absolute widest. I wish that crack wasn't there because I would make this a little bit wider, but honestly I think really this only needs to be maybe 6 inches wide. We'll start out a little bit wider just to be safe. And now we'll take our slab right to the straight line rip saw and rip it down into a 7-inch wide board. Or not, because, well, we don't have a straight line rip saw. So we're going to have to resort to the next best thing. Yes, I know, it's not perfectly straight, but it's close enough for now. Now I'll lay out one more straight line, and this will lay out my final 7-inch wide board. Again, the 7 inches is a little bit oversized, so I've got room to trim it down. That's why I'm not so worried about it being perfectly straight just yet. With the piece cut down to its oversized width, I'll then send it through the drum sander several times to roughly get it flat. In order to cut this piece down to its final width, I need to have a straight, square edge. So, a couple of passes on my jointer will square up one edge. And yes, if you're wondering, I have to run this out the door. I can now use this square edge along the fence on my table saw to safely cut this thing down to width. It's mighty tricky to work with any of these larger pieces of wood in my tiny shop, but there's always a way to work around that problem. So now I have this board almost to size. It's actually at the width that I want, but there's a little bit of thickness yet to remove. Before I finish sending this through the drum sander, I want to fill a couple of these knots. The reason I'm doing this now is because I can let the glue dry, and then when I send it back through the drum sander, it'll level out the glue and finish thicknessing the piece all at once. It's that whole 2 birds with 1 stone thing. With the board to thickness and one end square, now I can start from the square end work my way down and lay out the locations for all of the hangers. That way I'll get somewhere down here at this end, and that'll determine the length and where we can finally cut this thing to the final length. I need to have these marks on there first because that's going to tell me where the actual final length is going to be. And one last cut on the table saw to cut this to its final length. Now I'm at the step in the project where I need to do something for an edge treatment. I don't want to just put a square board up on the wall. Normally my go-to is a chamfer. It's just my favorite. I like the way it looks, I like the way light reflects off it, and that's probably what I'm going to do. But I want to kind of, I don't know, spice this thing up just a little bit. I want to do something with these corners. On my CNC machine, I made up this little template. It's got a couple little fence areas here. I can just lay this in place. The fences register against my piece, and that gives me a router template so that I can basically lop these corners off, and then we'll have this sort of inverse rounded profile at all four corners. All I really need to do is clamp this in place. I probably should cut this waste material away at the bandsaw, but honestly, in my small space for a shop, moving a board of this length around really gets kind of dangerous. I'll probably knock 53 different things on the floor, so I'm just going to go straight to the router with a flush trim bit. I'm not making this cut all in one pass, although I believe you could if you had the correct bit. I'm just using a regular flush trim bit with a bearing, and I'm making light passes, increasing the depth on the router as I go until it cuts all the way through. And now we'll add a chamfer to the edge. I think it's going to look cool with that corner kind of clipped off. Maybe we'll even make this chamfer a little bit bigger than I normally would. I'm now ready to drill the holes and cut the recesses for all the bits and pieces that I'm going to use to hold the hats. To hold all the brimmed hats, I'm going to use some pipe fittings and create something very similar to what I made for my daughter a year or two ago. If you haven't seen that video, I'll put a link down below in the description. I'm going to use some pipe fittings with some elbows and then a custom shaped piece of wood to kind of hold the hats. And then down below, I'm going to have some shaker pegs here. These will be used to hold ball caps and things like that. So kind of a combination. I'm going to put these every 14 inches and these are going to go every 7 inches. And to help me line everything up, another handy jig. This one has also another little fence on there. I can register it against my piece, line up the center line of this little template with the center line I've already marked down there. And then I have the drill location for the shaker peg, and also this recess fits these pipe fittings because instead of just screwing these on here, I want to use the router and route a little recess so that these will sit flush. I think it'll look just a little bit more finished and it'll look pretty good, I think. It fits perfect. And now we'll just repeat that process several more times until I have the entire length completed. With all the drilling and routing complete, this piece is now ready for, you guessed it, sanding. Also, for some reason, all of my audio is gone for a few clips here, so that's kind of strange. Not really sure what happened, but at least you don't have to listen to the sander running. Wouldn't it be great if all the sanding was completed at this speed? That would be awesome. With all the fun sanding complete, it's time to glue these pegs in. The last one, we'll clean up the squeeze out real quick. While I'm waiting for the glue to dry, I'm going to start working on the piece that's going to hold the brimmed hats. The way this will work is this flange goes into the recess in the hat rack that we already cut with the router. From there, a straight piece of pipe will get connected, followed by this 45-degree street elbow. Why they call it a street elbow, I don't know. One more flange gets connected to that, and that's going to tip this back. Now, I need to cut out a bunch of oval-shaped pieces that'll get attached to this final flange, which will hold the hat at an angle. It's going to look really cool. Pipe fittings. They're like Lincoln logs for building things. There's a whole lot of ways you could cut out an oval, and really whatever option works the best for you is the option to use. Me, I hired a robot to do it this time around. The robot doesn't complain doing monotonous work. He doesn't need to stop for a lunch break, and he's always there on time. It's kind of cool. At the router table, I'll add the same chamfer to this oval piece as I did to the main body of the hat rack. So these guys have the same recess on here. The flange fits right in there, holds the hat at an angle. The chamfered edge protects the hat from any sharp corners. It's perfect. I just need to spend a little bit of time sanding these. Don't worry, I'm going to do that off camera before we apply a finish. Shake well before using. My finish of choice for this project is some good old trusty spray lacquer. Dries fast, which means I can put on several coats and get this project done without waiting a really long time in between. And now it's time for some assembly. Thankfully, there's really not a whole lot to it. Just assembling the pipe fittings, screwing everything in place. And now we can just repeat that exact same process to connect all the pipe flanges to the back of these guys. Now this little 45-degree street elbow goes on the back of all of these. Street elbow. Is that because these are what's used to connect whatever the building's supply lines to the lines coming from the street back in the day? I don't think they still use these now. Maybe not. Maybe they do. I don't know. Those of you with the information, leave it down below. Why is it called a street elbow? From here on out, I think you can tell that the second, third, fourth, and fifth verse are going to be the same as the first. In case you're curious, this is a 6-inch length of half-inch pipe. That's the length that I found to work the best, to give the best distance. But depending on the hats that you want to hang on there, that distance could change. But for me and my application, I went with a 6-inch piece. Just get everything kind of worked into place, tight enough so that it stays. There we go. It's coming together. Whoa, easy. And that makes up our hat rack. How am I going to demonstrate this? It's kind of large. That turned out awesome. That looks great. Now all I need to do is get it hung up on the wall. I think to test this out really quick, I'm just going to carefully clamp it in the vise. Let's throw a couple hats on there. Now, of course, this is not going to stay mounted in the vise here in the shop. Ultimately, this is going to get mounted in the house, somewhere right inside the front door where you can come in, take off your hat, and just hang it up out of the way, or your coat, or whatever you decide to hang on there. But just as a demonstration, these pegs we'll be able to use for things like ball caps and hats, coats, that sort of thing. But the main reason is to be able to store things like cowboy hats and other brimmed hats. You just set it on there, and it stores it by the brim and protects the shape. You can store felt cowboy hats on there. You're not going to have to worry about anything getting deformed. I can still get to the hook underneath. I know you can't really see that, but you can still access it. Even if there was a coat, you could still get under there. For things like this straw hat here, fits on there perfect. And you can just go down the line. Any sort of wide-brimmed hat is going to be stored, easy access, grab and go kind of thing. Easy storage, protects the shape. This is going to work out awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed following along with this project. This was kind of fun, a little bit of a challenge because of the length. Now I know it might not be a bit of a challenge in your shop, but in my tiny shop, stuff like this is always a challenge. But it turned out awesome. We got it done. I love the combination of the metal pipe fittings and this cool kind of light brown color of the elm. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Thanks a lot for watching. I'm gonna go get this thing hung up, and we'll see you next time. Well, I think that is definitely the largest hat rack I've ever built. It's gonna work awesome. Keep the hats up out of the way. That way I can get a few more, keep my head from getting sunburned. Now I gotta go find a spot to hang this up and drill a couple holes. Get it mounted, make sure it's level. I better get after that if we're gonna get that done. Come on, let's go.